The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, welcome to HGSI. My name is Matthew Sorrells, and I'm here with George Roberts, and we're going to give an introductory lesson on how the high growth stock investor software works, aimed at trial users. We're going to probably go through all the major modules really fairly quickly without a lot of detail. More details on any specific part will be available in other webinars or online training videos. So when you first start up HGSI, you start with this main toolbar, and this the toolbar is the gateway into all the various parts of HGSI. Each one of HGSI's windows are separate. They're SDI windows, which means you can move them to multiple monitors. They're not all tied together into one big giant app. The toolbar is what starts and stops HGSI, and it consists basically of two parts. This part on the left, these four buttons are the main modules that make up HGSI, and the part on the right, which is just a bunch of utility tools, including functions for updating the database, managing how we work with interday data, backing up all your settings, as well as enabling you to migrate the settings to another computer, the main preferences, which control all the global options, and then the all-important help, which brings up this help menu, which will let you go to the online version of the help, as well as links to various parts of the website with tools and utilities, the About box, the community links. So if you're ever looking for an answer, the help button is available pretty much everywhere, and from the main toolbar, it'll bring up the main help. And the help in each individual window will bring up help for that specific window. So HGSI has a large stock database. That really is what makes the fundamentals of the product. And then on top of that stock database, which we update every day with end-of-day data, we build a group database. And the designer is really a group designer. It's a group management tool. And these groups are built on top of the stock database. And they really consist of two parts. There's the three groups that we manage, the HGS reference groups, the HGSI custom groups, and the smart groups. And then there's the user groups, which are any groups you want to make and you manage. These groups above are read-only, but you can duplicate them into the user groups and then modify them however you'd like. The reference groups are updated every day with lists of symbols. So for example, the all Amex are all the symbols that are on the American Stock Exchange, the all NASDAQ, the all NYSE. All securities contains all the securities in our database. Closed-end funds are all securities that are closed-end funds. We also have ETFs and ETNs split out. We have a few utility groups like this exchange indexes, which is, we'll talk about that in a second. We also have major market indexes. All the market indexes are in this all market indexes group, but we break out the major ones into the major market index because it's a lot easier to find. In all market indexes, there's almost 3,000 indexes, and really these 14 is what most users are interested in: the Dow, the NASDAQ, the S&Ps, the semis. These are just the big major market indexes. In addition to these kinds of groups, we also have an extensive organizational structure of industries and sectors. So we have all the industries broken out and updated with what securities are in each industry group. in addition to industries, we also have major industries, which are slightly larger collections than the industry level. We also have sectors, which are the highest level in our database as far as industry classifications. And these sectors are made up of industries, which you can see in the sectors by industry. So the communication sector, this is all the securities that are in the communication sector. And this is all the industries that are in the communication sector split up by industry. Every one of our groups in HGSI, in addition to being a group, we also build indexes for groups, which are kind of averages of the groups of the stocks that are in the group. And these indexes are controlled by preferences that are set from this main toolbar, the global index options. And until you're really experienced, I recommend just running with the standard settings for this, at least to start with, which will get you an equal dollar weighted index that's 1 year long. Indexes are computed against all the stocks that are in the group that meet the index filter, which by default is stocks $5 and above. And this kind of keeps the indexes from being too noisy. Stocks below $5 tend to have huge percent changes, which can skew indexes. When building indexes, we take all the securities in the index. So for example, the advertising and marketing industry, all these securities are then rolled up into this index. And if you take a look at an index, they start back 1 year or whatever the amount of length of time you set your indexer to. And on the start date, the index is pegged at 100. And then it changes as the stocks in that industry change. The indexes are rebuilt every day, every update. We roll up fundamental values. So for example, the EPS, the RS, and the group rank will be averages of the values in there. In the case of group rank, when you're looking at an actual industry index, it's the actual rank of that as a group. But generic indexes, we will roll the group average up. So you can see this advertising and marketing index, the average EPS rank of the stocks in this group is 49. Rankings are generally 1 to 99. The relative strength ranking for the stocks in this group is 56. We also roll up the earnings and revenue, and you'll notice these most recent quarters are 0 because the stocks in this industry haven't reported yet for this quarter or the next. But you can see how much revenue that industry group made in quarters past. These numbers will begin to fill in as more earnings are reported. At least the second quarter, which just finished up, this quarter will probably not start filling up for a little while. So in the designer, we're back to the designer here, so you can see the industry groups. In addition to the reference groups, we also have custom groups, which are generated on the server, and we keep history on various custom groups for an amount of time. So the big one right now is HGS Top 50, which is actually a collection of smart groups, which I'm going to talk about in a second. The top 50, we keep 1 year of history, so you can see what the picks were back in 2017. And this is organized by year and by month, as well as the most recent dates, a copy of the stocks that were on the top 50 then, pulled out so you can easily find it. We also download some various CBOE, the 300 most active options these are the most optional, highest volume stocks that have options available. And that's a monthly list. It gets updated every month. And these stocks are generally interesting because you could use them as a fishing pond to start applying filters and rules against, as opposed to using all securities. The OCC 300 most active options is another list of similar active options from the OCC. The smart groups are the third type of reference group that we manage. And the smart groups are generated every day using various rules and filters. And we collect the results of those in this smart group section. If you'd like to keep the results, you will need to make copies of these groups because they change every day. What you see under the smart groups is controlled by what you choose under manage subscriptions, and that's under the file menu in the designer, manage group subscriptions. And you can eliminate or add in these groups as you, whatever you're interested in. Some of these rules and filters that generate these groups you may not be interested in at all. A lot of them are basically technical filters that were applied against all securities or other groups in the reference group section, and that produced a list of stocks that met that filter, and then they become a group under the smart groups. And these can be really good starting groups for applying a filter. And that's what we're going to talk about now, is how you can make your own user group using a filter inside the designer. And so you need to pick a starting group of some sort. And so for this purposes, I'm going to use the S&P 1500. It's basically the top 1500 by market cap stocks in the US. And we're going to build a filter to find stocks in this list. And so we're going to go to the filter, and in the filter you see a list of available filters. We ship with a number of starting filters. We have some add-on filters that you can add on to your version of HGSI if you don't want to build your own filters. But for today, we're going to actually build our own filter. So I'm going to select new filter, user filters, and then I'm going to click new filter, and it brings up the filter dialog. And then I'm going to name the filter. So that I can remember what it is. And so the filter is basically a logical statement. It's if, and then you choose a field that you want to look for. So we have a vast number of technical fields. They're all organized by categories and subcategories. But if you have an idea of what you're looking for, you can just type it. So let's say we're interested in things dealing with the 50-day moving average. So I'm going to type 50, and you see a whole bunch of fields that have to do with the 50-day moving average. And so let's do days since the 50-day moving average crossover. And so that's when the close is above the 50-day moving average. And then the next field in the filter is choosing the operator. And so the available operators depends on the kind of field. So strings have different kinds of searches. So in this case, we're looking for things that have crossed the 50. And so when days since is equal to 0, that means the close crossed today above the 50. So let's look for things that have crossed in the last 3 days. Now, we don't know what we're going to get for this, and we could press OK and see what the results are. But in the filter, there's this little preview button, which will let you see the results of this filter applied to this group and this has one of our group drop downs, and by default it starts to all securities. So I'm going to change this to the S&P 1500 so we can see. And so down here you can see that there are at least 912 stocks that in the last 3 days their close is crossed above the 50-day moving average, or at least 3 days ago or more it crossed above. So let's try and narrow this down a little bit more. Let's see who crossed exactly today. And so these are the companies that crossed exactly today. And so let's add another rule. We want things that are crossed in the last 3 days, so less than 4. So greater than or equal to 0 and less than 4 will get us stocks that have crossed in the last 3 days. And so there's 105 stocks that have just recently crossed the 50-day moving average. And the preview here will add extra columns depending on what fields you choose to filter on. And so we could add another filter rule here. Let's look for stocks with a last close greater than 5. That's not going to get us enough of a filter, I don't think. Most of these stocks are already above 5. Why don't we try something a little bit, let's try a ranking. So a relative strength ranking. So relative strength rankings are generally 1 to 99. And so stocks that have been performing really well will have a high ranking. So let's see. So here's stocks that have a high relative strength ranking that just recently crossed the 50-day moving average. So that's a really good list. So let's go with this as our filter. Now, you're going to want to build up your own filter rules or modify rules that were already included in this filter section to meet the kind of prospecting criteria you want. But in this case, we've made a simple rule, simple filter, and we're going to apply it to the S&P 1500, and we end up with 4 stocks. And so now we're going to make a group out of that by using the file menu and say make group, and we're going to save this as a group. And as I was talking, every group in our product has an index, and it takes a while sometimes to build indexes, so we asked you to be sure. Now, the filter is still applied, but all the stocks we put in this group meet our filter because that's how we found them. And now we've moved down to the new user group. But I'm going to remove this filter. And to remove a filter in HGSI, if you hold down the Shift key when you click on the filter button, it will remove the filter. And then from here, we can then go and take a look at let's look at the ranking module next. And so if you click the ranking module from inside of one of the windows, it will open the current group on the ranking. And so here's our current group. And usually in HGSI, the first drop down is the group. The second drop down will be the list of stocks. But in the case of the ranking and the warehouse, the stock list is actually in the window itself. And so then, unlike the charting, which has the list of stocks. And then there's options for what to view. And this is more what to show you on the ranking. The ranker has a set of options for what to rank against. In this case, I'm only loading 6 months of data, and I'm ranking on percent change for the last 3 weeks. And then velocity is defined as the percent change over 6 weeks. And so these stocks are ranked on weekly basis, 1 to 99 on the percent change. And you can see here that the history here, this guy's been above all the other ones, and it had a short period of time where it wasn't the biggest relative strength on a 3-week percent change basis, but then it's been doing better in the past than the rest. As you click on these columns, it'll change which week gets sorted, and you can see which stocks. So when you double click on a stock, it will open the charting, and whatever sort order you had in the window you're in will go to the charting. So if I open up this one, the order of the stocks in this window will be the same as they were in the ranking window, so that you can then next through them. And here we are in the charting, and I'm using just a standard default chart here. The group database selector on the left, then the list of stocks, arrow keys to move you through the stocks, search button, which you can also get to by hitting spacebar, a symbol search. So if you can just type a symbol and it'll find the symbol. If it's in the current group, you'll be moved to that symbol. And if the symbol isn't in the current group, it'll move you to the all securities group and then find the symbol. In the charting in the warehouse, we have a concept of a view, and a view is it controls how the data is shown on this window. And so in our charting, we have a number of charting views. By default, you're using a default view, but you can make your own, and we're going to do that in a second so that we can add some moving averages and some other indicators to this chart. The view selector lets you choose the view. You can also bring up the quick pick dialog, which stays on the screen and allows you to pick views from it. And so you can quickly walk through a whole bunch of different kinds of views, and views can control pretty much everything about how the charting draws. The quick pick menu is really the quick way of walking through a whole bunch of different views. You can also just choose them from the drop down if you'd like. The next two buttons are the two buttons that control choosing the view and creating views and editing the current view. And so we're going to make our own view here. So the standard default view, which is basically if you edit a view consists of a set of generic options for the name of the view and how much data to show, what kind of chart period, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly. And then the view itself consists of windows, and each window contains one or more indicators. And so there's a price window, and it's got the price indicator and the splits and dividends window, and that's what this top part here is. And then there's a splitter bar, which separates the volume window, and you can see the windows are labeled price window and volume. And then the volume window has just the volume indicator. So we're going to make our own view. So we go into user views and we say new view, and this works just like the filters did. We choose the folder we want to stick it in. And then we can make a view. Naming views is important. You can also rename them, obviously, after you've made them. And then by default, a view comes with just two windows, a price window and a volume window. And then to add more indicators, so for example, since we found these stocks by looking at the 50-day moving average, let's add an indicator and let's add a moving average. So if you type in the indicator search box words, it'll show you things that are related to that. And so there's the moving average indicator, or you can just expand through and find them. Here's the moving average indicator, and it has a bunch of options that are relative to it, including color and line types, as well as the field to make the moving average on, so you can choose the high or the low, the typical median or weighted close. And you can also choose exponential or weighted moving averages. So let's just add a 50-day moving average to the chart. And so now we've got two indicators in the price window and the volume indicator in the volume window. So we okay that, and then we apply the view, and there's the view with our moving average. And you can see this just crossed in the last 3 days, the 50. Inside the charting, you can zoom in and out with the zoom controls. You can also zoom in and out with the Alt keys. Alt 1 is a close zoom, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the default zoom again. The default zoom is this first button here. It gets you a reasonable view of the stock. The zoom keys will zoom you in more or less, depending on how much you'd like to fit in. The zoom will only go back so far, and if you want to have an even larger view of the stock, you can switch to a weekly, monthly, or quarterly view, which will let you zoom out even more time-wise, whereas a daily view, you won't be able to, even zoomed all the way out, this is the most you can see. On our charting, there's a main panel at the top. This fundamental panel, it's controlled with this button right here. It will toggle the fundamental panel on and off. The fundamental panel actually has 5 sub-panels, which you can choose with these 2 arrows on the right. And they just provide various fundamental and technical values so that you can see them while you're looking at the chart, including a business description field, which also contains the sector, industry, and major industry, some of the moving averages, earnings data, more earnings and fundamentals, yield, dividends, and then this one, which shows you the historical revenue and EPS for the last 8 quarters, as well as our scorecard of earnings, EPS ranking, relative strength ranking, group ranking, and then ERG, which is all 3 together added, percent accumulation distribution, some industry sector data. On our charting, one thing you will notice is if you make the window smaller at a certain point, the toolbar will break. And so the bigger your window, the less if your window's wide enough, it won't have to break the toolbar. This section here on this fundamental panel will actually vanish if you make the window too small, and if you make it large enough, it'll come back into view. But this is just a convenience functionality. If your laptop or screen isn't wide enough, you can still get at all this data using the warehouse. And so that's where we're going to go next. In the warehouse, the purpose of the warehouse, just like the ranker, it allows you to see a bunch of technical data. In this case, you get to choose from all the available columns that we have in HGSI. So there are more than 700 data fields. All of these are computed during the update so that they can be brought up quickly. But that means you cannot customize the equations that are used. So we're going to make and so this is the default view for the warehouse, which shows just some earnings, rankings, and other fields. The warehouse is a spreadsheet. It consists of a section in the front which doesn't scroll if you have many columns, and then there's the section on the other side of the splitter which does scroll. Columns can be sorted on, just like Excel. Clicking on this box will bring the selection to the top of the list. Clicking on it again will bring the selection to the bottom of the list. In this case, we only have 5 items, so there's not really a big jump there. But if you have a large list of stocks, it is. So just like on the charting. The first drop down is the group database. The second drop down is the views. The quick pick works the same way. It allows you to quickly pick warehouse views. The keys here, these toggle whether or not the filter is applied or not. Views in the warehouse can apply filters and combination rankings, and these allow you to turn that on and off. It's kind of a more advanced functionality. We'll have some other videos that'll talk about that. So just like in the charting, there's the choose, create view, and edit view dialogues. And so here's all the views you can choose, and you can use this to find a view. So if you're looking for, some sort of view, and you have an idea of what the view has been named, you can look through and find the view that you're looking for. In this case, we're going to make our own view, and you can also organize the choose create view dialog is where you organize views. You can move them around, you can rename them, you can delete them, you can duplicate them, you can edit them, you can make your own folders, and there's a few other utility functions as well. So just like in the charting, we're going to go into new views, and we're going to make a new view, and we're going to call this so the view dialog, the view editor, you can make a view that activates a filter, and as well as a view that activates a combination ranking. And those functionalities means it's possible to use views as a way of prospecting for stocks, because you apply the view and it applies the filter and shows the columns that you're interested in. So in this case, we're going to, we want to show a few fields in the warehouse. So let's start with last close, since that's kind of important. And then let's do the days since the 50-day moving average crossover, since we filtered on that. And let's do percent close over the 50-day. And let's add in, how about percent dividend yield? Just say our warehouse columns are our mix of fundamentals as well as technicals. Some of the numbers are computed from the chart, and other numbers are computed from filings in the SEC that we then get the data from a data vendor. So in this case, these are the columns that we want to display, and you can move them up and down to change the order that they're displayed in. And then you OK the edit dialog, and then here's the columns we chose. And you can see Momenta is 9.7% above the 50-day moving average, but it doesn't have any dividend yield. WW Granger has a 1.8% dividend yield. So perhaps you were interested in stocks that met your filter, which, because we created this group with that filter, all these stocks have to match it. And so you could find the one with the largest dividend yield by looking at this column. And then you can go back to the charting and see the stock you were looking at. And it gives you a set of tools for looking at stocks using various data fields, as well as traditional charting indicators, which you can then tweak, add in some more fields depending on the kind of things. Like, for example, we have every stock is assigned to well, not every stock, but most stocks are assigned to industry groups, and you can actually plot the group index on the chart. And so The scale on this indicator is not the same as the scale on the rest of the windows. If you check use private scale, and so the scaling is not relative, but the values are. So you can see how the group index is tracked pretty much along with this stock, almost exactly along with this stock. There are slight divergences, but as a rule, this stock has pretty much tracked the industry. This stock hasn't quite done as well as the industry, but it's also followed the same general pattern as the industry, which makes sense because we chose stocks that were high relative strength, that would they tend to follow along. Averages tend to work that way, and that's the 4 major sections of HGSI. We also have a couple of things you can do quickly. So we have this report window, which you can leave up on the screen, and it changes as you pick a different stock, and so you can see more fundamentals and technicals as just kind of a reference while you're prospecting, and it changes when you whatever window you change the stock focus on, it'll change. The at the end of every day, at the beginning of your prospecting, you probably will want to update the stock database using the update option. And there's some additional options for how to do the updating. The updating takes a little while because it has to process and compute all the technicals that make up our database. So I recommend doing it and coming back. The faster your hard drive is, the better off it will be to finish the processing. And once you've done the update, all the fields in the warehouse will be computed using the data that was in the most recent update available. And I think that's probably about the core of what we were going to talk about today. If you have any questions on HGSI, you can always send mail to support@highgrowthstock.com, and we'll try to get back to you on any specifics. We'll cover more of these kinds of intro tutorials, as well as some tutorials that dive in more details in each one of the modules as we go along.